Okay, here we go. This is my fifth try at putting together the Introduction to Experience 5 guided tutorial. And I've had all kinds of technical difficulties. So rather than hear me rant, hopefully this one will work. It's kind of like eating your fifth pizza. I love pizza, but by the fifth piece, I'm pretty much sick of it. So hopefully I will come strong and give you this final overview, and hopefully I'll have a little bit of energy left. I took a break, and now I'm coming back at it. I think I got the technical things ironed out. I reset everything. Hopefully this works. But I think I can hear the champagne corks popping, the sighs of relief, the tears of sadness that this Entrepreneurship 621 is now in the home stretch. You're almost done, and this 5-week class is nearly in the books, and you're ready to close the door and move on to your next course in the online MBA program. It's a little sad. I'm also a little excited, because I'm always happy to see a class come to a conclusion and hear from students that they've learned something, but at the same time a little sad as well. So basically what we're going to do in this overview is give you a quick introduction to exit strategies, a little bit of discussion or a setup for the All Things Must Pass movie, and a quick integration, kind of quick overview of what we've gone through. So let's talk about exit strategies. Again, apologize for this not being up earlier, but like I said, technical difficulties just killing me today. But exit strategy, generally speaking, kind of in normal life, an exit strategy is a method of getting out, kind of a pre-planned way of getting out of a sticky situation. I always think back to driver training, the one lesson that stuck with me, or at least the one that I seem to always recall, was the leave yourself an out. Kind of always plan for the worst to happen and be prepared for it. And people have that even when you're in life. I think of people going to cocktail parties and they say, like, if I give you the high sign, come over and, drag me away if I get stuck in a conversation. So we always have these ways of getting out of things. In the context of an entrepreneurial venture, exit strategies are a way of leaving, closing the book, starting a new chapter, cashing out, however you want to term it. It's a thought out way of moving on, and we all have to move on eventually, whether we want to or not, because we're not going to be around forever, and you're not gonna maybe your business will survive your lifetime, and that's a great thing, but you won't out survive the business. And so an exit strategy, conventional thinking, is that there's going to have to be a harvest at some point, that the business is going to, you've been tilling the soil and tending the crop, and at some point all this value you've created should be harvested at some time. And even Timmons in his the readings I've given you talks about this harvest mentality. So you work hard, you build a successful, sustainable business, and at some point you either want to move on, try something different, you want to do something different in your life, maybe you're forced to move on, whatever it is, at some point, or somebody makes you an offer you can't refuse. Having thought through the possible exit strategies, I think, prepares you for that inevitable. You're going to have to face it at some point. Now, the flip side to that is that I have a fair amount of students that will say, whoa, wait a second, shouldn't you, especially at the startup phase, when you only have so much mental and physical energy, shouldn't you be focusing on all the stuff that you need to do, the stuff that needs to go right, growing the business, creating value for your customers and your team? And absolutely, you should be doing that. But it doesn't mean that you can't be thinking about the possibilities that somewhere down the road there's an exit. And I often think when students bring that up, I often think of the burn the boats, story. If you go back in history, there's always these tales of great leaders or people of history that didn't see any point in turning back, and one of the more famous ones, and whether these are true or not, it's always hard to discern, but in the early 1500s when Hernan Cortez sailed across the Atlantic, landed in Mexico, and ultimately overtook the Aztec Empire, if I'm remembering my history correctly. I may be fuzzy at this point. But, after that arduous journey, the lore is that he told his men to burn the boats. In other words, there's no turning back. We either win or we die. And there's no escape route. We're here and we got to make it happen. And, you really want to have that mindset going into an entrepreneurial venture. But having an exit strategy in a business sense doesn't mean that you're leaving yourself an out. It just means that you're thinking about a positive possibility down the road. So worth thinking about in terms of framing this idea of an exit strategy. Realistically, these exit strategies are often a choice, but they're also often driven by external factors. One of the things I think has become very popular in our current era is that people are building businesses with the idea of exiting quickly, making a quick strike. It's almost like I'm going to hit the mother lode, cash out, and go do something fun or do something else. And I think that's really kind of a residual and continuing effect from the whole .com era. And I see it among a lot of younger entrepreneurs that they really want to strike, be successful, cash out, and go do something else. And it's kind of an interesting, because they're not necessarily thinking about building a company for the long term, which is an interesting approach. Now, choice in the sense that, you really want to do it. You're thinking that you want to start multiple businesses in your lifetime, and so this is going to be one of them, and you're thinking about how am I going to exit and move on and do something else. But also it can be driven by these external factors. One would be investors. If you take on professional investors, angel capital or venture capital, they need a liquidity event to happen, an exit to happen in some form or fashion. They're taking equity in your business. That's got to be liquid at some point. You either have to sell the business, go public, buy the stock back, whatever, because otherwise they're not getting their capital back. And these investors, if it's an angel investor, that's his or her personal net worth that's, they're reinvesting. If it's a venture capital firm, these venture funds are externally raised. They're not the firm's money. So they've got to repay their investors. So there has to be this liquidity event, this exit at some point in the future. Competition and industry change can drive this. When I think of this example, I think of an entrepreneur I met about 10 years ago. He had started a business, it failed, and he lost everything. And he and his family moved into a one-bedroom apartment. They literally started over after having a lot of success. And over a period of time, slowly got back into and started a business, and grew it into a very successful firm. And now he was at a crossroads. His industry, his market was turning into a red ocean, and he was going to need to double down basically, and go out and get more capital to stay competitive. He had already given up more equity than he wanted to, so he wasn't going to go that route, and he was going to have to raise it through debt capital. And after sitting down and having a heart-to-heart with his wife, they sat back and said, you know what, we're in our early 50s. I don't think we want to do this. I mean, we've got a nice house on the hill. It overlooks the ocean, nice cars, nest egg. Do we want to take that risk at this point in our life? And they said no. So he said, I'd never thought seriously about building or selling the business, but now was the point to do that. And ultimately he did sell the business. And quite honestly, I've seen him multiple times since he sold the business. He's happier than ever, loves what he's doing, and said, it wasn't what I was planning to do, but you know what? Sometimes things happen, and competition and industry changes can force your hand. Last and certainly not least is, we're fragile beings, and health, family, disability, death are all a part of our experience, unfortunately. And so sometimes that can happen. I was friends with an entrepreneur who had a very successful company, and then he got cancer, and he ultimately passed away. And they really weren't planning for that to happen. And, I had to have, about 7 years ago, I had to have a very uncomfortable talk with my parents about they really needed to sit down and seriously think, after I told them numerous times, they really needed to seriously consider selling the family business, because they were having health issues. And as I told my father, I said, look, I know you think you're going to live forever, but you're not. And what if you pass away and then mom has the business and she's not doing that great? And what's she going to do with it? And then it's going to be stress on her, and then it's going to be stress on the rest of the family. And I said, you really got to be proactive here and start thinking about cashing out now, harvesting now while you still can. And ultimately they did. And as my dad says now, best thing they ever did, after fighting me on this for years. But sometimes, you can choose to exit, and other times it's foisted upon you. When it comes to exiting, as you'll see in the readings, if you haven't already done them by now, since I was late getting this up due to all the technical issues, lots of ways you can slice this. You can just outright sell the business. You can merge with another company. You could do an initial public offering. IPO is probably not going to be the norm. That's really for a select group of companies that are going to go public on the stock exchange, either NASDAQ or, more common would be a sale or a merger and an acquisition, or an employee stock ownership program, ESOP. This has become very popular, and I know 2 companies that have done it in the last couple of years. And they kind of said, look, our employees helped us build this business to a really successful level. Let's reward them by selling part of the company and or all of the company over a period of time to them. That creates a steady stream of revenue or income for us over a period of time. We'll slowly divest ourselves of the business. It's a win-win for everybody. Alternatively to the exit strategy can be to really not exit in the more traditional sense. More exit physically, maybe even mentally, emotionally, where you've built a good team, a good solid business is sustainable, and you've got the people in place that can run it for you. And you scale back your time. And I'm thinking of a company here locally that I've worked with, and the owner has, he's got all the toys. He's got a steady income from the business. He's really backed out. He said he's hired a good president. He's still CEO, but he's not working in the business full time. He's actually spending more time developing his foundation, his nonprofit foundation. So he's in a great place, and eventually he'll figure out how to do the final exit. But for now, it's a cash cow for him. And then the last piece of the puzzle, just kind of would be a liquidation. I'm always puzzled by this, though, because why would you build a business and then just shut it down? And I see this more. It happens more than often than you probably think, and I've seen it here locally with a couple of businesses in the last year that I thought, you just put 30 or 40 years into building this business, and then you shut it down, and all you get out of it is selling whatever assets you have in the business, which often isn't a lot. It just seems odd. It almost seems like you were working at a job for 40 years, getting a paycheck, but not really building any equity and having something of value that was created in the long run that could be harvested. But it is a strategy. You can exit the business. So that's just a quick look at exit strategies. Realistically, I'm a big advocate of at least thinking about exit strategies early on. What would it look like? Who would the possible, if we were going to sell, who would be the possible acquirers? Because then that kind of informs the strategy of how you develop the business. And realistically, look, hey, all good things come to an end. You're either going to get bored, something else is going to attract you, you're going to have a life event, industry is going to change, competition, or you're going to pass away. All good things are going to come to an end. The chapter is going to close. All things must pass. Speaking of which, All Things Must Pass is the movie that you are going to be, if you haven't already started viewing it, is the concept here with this movie, much like October Sky, is that I really want you to watch the movie from the perspective of this class. But in this case, since it's not in the beginning of the class and it's at the end of the course, I want you to watch it from the perspective of everything, every piece of the puzzle that you've picked up in this class. And I really want you to try and uncover what Russ Solomon, who was the founder of Tower Records, All Things Must Pass is about Tower Records. What did Russ Solomon and his team do well? And what did they do poorly? It's a business that got to $1 billion in revenue, and then it crashed and burned. Why? What happened there? And so I think this movie, which I've seen 3 times now, I just watched it again last night, and every time I watch it, I pick up a little different nuance or something I think, that applies to something we've talked about in class or covered in this course. And so the integration piece here in 621 is, how can I take all the things that I've been exposed to and use that as a lens to view this movie and see what I can pull out? And, some of it's kind of obvious and really some of it's not. Some of it's very nuanced. But that's the beauty of streaming, is that you can go in and watch the movie and basically, kind of stop and start, take notes and all that good stuff. So I hope I think it's a fun movie. It's an interesting story, and hopefully you'll get, a lot out of it. After I watched it last night, I started thinking, I wonder what, because this is the first time I've used this movie. I was thinking to myself, what if Russ had taken this class? Now, Russ would say, you'll see it in the movie. Russ says, I'm not a business guy. But what if Russ had taken Entrepreneurship 621? You need to think about this too. What if Russ had taken 621? Would he have done things any differently? Would the outcome have been different? And I kind of think that in some ways, yes, the outcome would have been different. I think you could say that Tower Records was probably as much as anyone in the music industry in a great position to make the transition when the sea change came. But you can also look at it from the flip side, was Tower Records what it was because of who Russ was? Something to think about. I hope you enjoy the movie. It's got a little bit of, not suitable for work type language. And there are some drug references, and, I don't advocate drugs, but I think that was just kind of the time when Tower Records was in its formative years. So, but hopefully you enjoy the movie. I really enjoy it. I love music, but I love business more, and I thought it was an interesting combination to see how that business formed, evolved, grew, and then exploded dramatically. Switching gears, integration. I just really want to quickly kind of touch on a couple of things. More than a couple, sorry. If I look back at the objective of this course, it's really about understanding entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs. What these people do and why they do it. And if I really had to kind of boil it down, one of the takeaways from this class, I think, is that you get exposed to a lot of foundational material, and you have a better idea, I hope, of what could lie ahead if you choose this path. And if you choose this path, I think you're not an expert. One class doesn't make you an expert, but I think you really have insight into how to do things the right way. And I'm constantly amazed when, over the years, as I've consulted with a variety of companies, how many, really, I think, from my perspective, I thought that's a really dumb mistake that they made. And I started calling them rookie mistakes, because what I found out is these people just didn't know any better. They made mistakes because they just didn't know any better. And I think the function of this class is that you now understand the role of a lot of key components and processes that are involved in creating a new venture. And I think it applies both to your own venture as well as new ventures within organizations, corporate ventures and things like that. But, kind of running down that laundry list, who starts businesses? Entrepreneurs. Is everybody an entrepreneur? What's the difference between a small business owner and an entrepreneur? Are entrepreneurs because of what they do, or because of what they think, or how they solve problems? And the nice thing about this class is that you've gotten exposed to that real wide lens look at who entrepreneurs are. And you've even been kind of forced to assess where you fit into that. And, are they born or made? Is it really about characteristics and traits and behaviors, or is it the way they think, the effectual reasoning and the problem solving approach they take? Are they really wild risk takers, or are they risk mitigators, which I've been kind of proposing that as a key component of who entrepreneurs are. So you have a better sense of that. You know what it takes to be an entrepreneur. You know that every business starts as an idea, but that not every idea represents a business opportunity, and that there's some kind of a framework, as I presented my 5 conditions, as an initial way of looking at how do you know whether your idea is any good, and how do you come up with ideas? There's a process. There's fertile ground and areas to look for ideas, and we know that it's hard. Almost everybody to a person said this is not easy to come up with ideas, but hopefully through that process you got some insight into how you ideate and what works well for you, and you can see that, boy, gosh, oh man, it takes a lot of ideas to come up with a good idea. And then you transition into, how do I take this idea and make it a reality? Well, what are the startup models available to me? You'd be amazed at how many people still follow that popular traditional model, because it's so embedded and ingrained in popular culture. And when you read about starting a business, there's still a lot of people that think that's the way to do it. Write a business plan, build the product or put together the service, marketing and branding, get the customers, live happily ever after. And as Steve Blank said, no business plan survives first contact with the customers. So you got the 3 startup models. You saw the pros and cons of each. You saw the shit model. You saw the lean startup. You know what a business model is and why it's important to think about all these components of how they create a value proposition for your business and for your customer. So you've got this, informed way of thinking, how do I actualize this idea? We talked about the Timmons model and how you as the entrepreneur have to kind of assess and shape and juggle the opportunity, the team, and the resources in this really dynamic environment. And what are resources? Is it money? That's what everybody thinks first. But you now know that it's intangible and tangible resources. And you can argue that oftentimes intangible resources may be more important. In fact, I argued in one of the discussion points that I think, sometimes the network and the connections and the knowledge base and the team is what helps you leverage some of the tangible resources beyond what you currently control. Thinking back to that, entrepreneurship is about pursuing opportunity beyond resources currently controlled. Can you start a business without a lot of money? Yes. Can you bootstrap? Can you start a business while you're working full-time? Yeah, it can be a part-time endeavor. And in fact, I wrote in one of the discussion pieces that Shit Audio is a great example. The founders of that, they were working full-time on their other businesses when they started Shit Audio. It was a part-time endeavor for them. And over time, it morphed into a substantive business. So this idea of resources and being creative with resources, hopefully that resonates with you. The team, a key resource. I think everybody agreed that teams are vital. But how do you put together a team? When do you put together a team? What do you look for? Do you go for 5 Kobe Bryants, or do you know what you don't know and you look at the business and assess what you need skill-wise and expertise-wise? And I always come out with having a good, diverse team that fills the gaps. But at the end of the day, I love to have a team where everybody thinks like an owner, that there's a shared vision, there's commitment, and everybody thinks like an owner, but not everybody's equal. Going back to that unequal equals, we got to slice the pie the correct way. And last but not least, exit strategies. All things must pass. Things will happen, whether you want to or not. You should give some consideration. It's okay to think about, I'm all in, I'm burning the boats, but realistically, there's going to have to be an exit at some point in time. If the business is successful and relatively sustainable, you've got to think about an exit strategy. So that's from the perspective of integrating, and that's just kind of my quick riff on some of the things we've covered in the course. Obviously not comprehensive, but just kind of a teaser and a reminder as you're going to be putting together your reflective project, and that reflective project should capture those top 10 takeaways in a really creative, unique way. I would be remiss if I didn't reinforce again that, and from an integrative standpoint, goodness gracious, 5 weeks is not enough. And this course, one course can't cover everything. And realistically, in this course, we didn't cover a lot of stuff. As I look at this list, the nuts and bolts of entrepreneurial finance, that's an entirely separate course. We teach a whole course on entrepreneurial finance for our students. Marketing, entrepreneurial marketing. We didn't talk about a lot of concepts there. Some of the guerrilla marketing techniques and the channels of distribution. We talked about, lean startup and ship model and all that stuff. But realistically, in the lean startup, we didn't take you through the whole process. We didn't give you all the mechanics of it. We didn't show you exactly how to execute on it. You did some test interviews, but you didn't go through the entire process. We just gave you the key concept and a little dip in the pool. But in some of our other entrepreneurship courses, we go in deep. We didn't talk about launch strategies and mechanics. That's another course. We teach a course called Launching the Entrepreneurial Venture, where we talk about go-to-market strategies and regulations and legal forms of business and location issues and all kinds of things related to launching, growing and managing a company. I don't think I mentioned it, but typically entrepreneurs go through 3 phases. The first phase is doing. You're wearing all the hats. You're doing everything. That's a fun time. Then as the business grows, you start managing. You've got people under you. You're managing them. And if it keeps growing, eventually you're managing managers, and eventually you're managing managers or managing managers or managing managers. It keeps going. But that involves a lot of stuff, and we actually have a course on that, managing a growing business. How do you manage growth so that it doesn't kill you and the business? We didn't teach you how to pitch, elevator pitch, how to pitch your business concept to investors, to potential team members. Real important skill. Wish we could get to it. Maybe in the future I'll be able to weave it in, but again, 5 weeks, tough to do. We didn't really talk a lot about negotiation and dealing with outside investors. How do I deal with angel investors, venture capitalists, that kind of stuff. Again, lots involved in that. And then last but not least, in this quick hit of what we weren't able to get to in this class, and by design we can't, is the sweat, the stress, and the sleeplessness, the 3 S's. Now, you may have been sleepless and stressed in this class, but not for the reasons I wanted. In the face-to-face 621 class, we have the immersion project, where students actually have to start a business and run it for 10 weeks. That really tests their mettle, and they all report that they sweat, they are stressed, and they lose sleep. And, that approximates what they would be going through as an entrepreneur. Unfortunately, I haven't figured out a way in the online class to be able to do that yet. So if you have any ideas on that, please let me know. I've been kicking around some ideas, but I haven't been, quite honestly, able to develop them fully enough and probably even courageous enough to roll them out in a 5-week online class. So, but hopefully you got some sense that sweat, stress, and sleeplessness is a part of the equation. Okay, next steps for you here in Experience 5. Get, if you haven't already done them, do the readings. Watch the All Things Must Pass movie. If you have young children, keep them away from the movie while you're watching it, because there is some little adult language and adult topics in there. Discussions, got to engage in the discussions. And I think I'm going to, because the discussions have been going, I think, really well. I don't know how you guys think. but I've been pretty impressed for the most part. And I'm thinking that I might pare down and eliminate the exit strategy discussion and just have you focus on all things must pass. But I will send out a message, an update on Schoology to that effect if I do decide that. I'm kind of leaning in that direction right now. And part of that's due to the fact that you've got a lot going on this week. You got the business model canvas / business concept profile project to finish up. And you have the reflective project. And again, remember, creativity is a highly desired aspect of that project. So that's what you've got to face. And then last but not least, what's the future hold for you? I have no idea. But one thing I hope is that through this experience of the Entrepreneurship 621 class, you've learned something. That's fundamentally the most important thing. You've learned something. And you've learned something that you can potentially take and use in the future, now or in the future. Again, it's a dip in the pool. You didn't get everything. But hopefully it whetted your appetite if you were interested in learning more, or it reinforced some things if you have some experience. And my hope is that you find value in the experience. I've gotten some really nice comments from students thus far about how they think the class has gone, and they've a couple have commented on the gap between theory and practice is very narrow in this class, so it's easy to be able to take what we're learning and apply it, or think about how you might apply it, and that's always a good thing. I think having that gap between theory and practice be as narrow as possible so you can jump across that chasm relatively easy with your newfound skills and knowledge. I've had a blast. I always enjoy teaching the class. I'm a little sad that it's ending. I'm also relieved too. Like you, I'm doing a lot of this stuff late at night. It's a second, it's an offload class for me, so I'm having to fit it into my after hours and my breaks during the day. But hopefully it's been beneficial. I've enjoyed working with you guys, and I hope that perhaps we will meet again in the future. And if you are able to put these concepts into action, please let me know. Keep me posted on how things are going. So again, thanks for everything, and hopefully I will see you down the road. And remember, think like an owner.